Rewrite your story. 10 life-changing motivational stories. Study motivation. Have you ever felt like giving up? Like life has knocked you down so many times you wonder if you'll ever rise again? Well, what if I told you that the most inspiring people in history faced the same moments of despair and came out stronger? Today, I'll share 10 incredible real-life stories. Stories of perseverance, belief, heartbreak, triumph, and transformation. These stories won't just touch your heart, they might just change your life. Story 1. The janitor who became a CEO. At 19, Michael worked nights as a janitor in a tech company's empty halls. While others chased comfort, he pushed a mop with dreams in his pocket. He didn't have a degree, but he had hunger, curiosity, and grit. Every hallway he cleaned whispered a question. Could there be more? And deep down, he believed the answer was yes. Michael didn't grow up with much, just a hard-working mother and secondhand books. While his friends chased quick wins, he found power in stories of visionaries and builders. Late at night, he'd sit quietly, reading worn magazines pulled from the trash. They weren't just articles, they were blueprints. And in every page, he saw a future no one else imagined for him. While the world slept, Michael stayed behind. In the dim break room, with a cracked laptop and a cup of cheap coffee, he studied. Online courses, case studies, product design, UX. He couldn't afford tuition, but he could afford discipline. Every click, every note, every late-night hour brought him one step closer to a future no one else saw coming. One night, while wiping down a whiteboard, Michael overheard two product managers arguing. He hesitated, then quietly offered a suggestion. Simple, sharp, unexpected. Silence fell. They stared, unsure whether to laugh or listen. A janitor giving product advice? But a week later, they returned with a nod. It worked. That moment changed everything. What started as a whisper became a ripple. The idea he shared, offhand, uninvited, actually worked. Word spread. The janitor who understood users better than most. He wasn't just cleaning rooms, he was solving problems. For the first time, people looked at him differently, and more importantly, he began to see himself differently too. They gave him a shot, an internship without a degree. Michael took it and never looked back. He started small, taking notes, asking questions, learning fast. Promotion followed promotion. Not because he was the loudest, but because he listened, solved, delivered. He didn't climb the ladder. He built every rung beneath his feet. 10 years later, Michael wasn't pushing a mop. He was shaping vision. From late-night learner to team leader, he now walked the same halls in polished shoes, guiding others with the same humility he started with. His ideas moved markets, his leadership built trust, and the kid no one noticed had become the man everyone followed. When the CEO stepped down, the board searched for someone who knew the company, truly knew it. One name rose above the rest. Michael. He had lived every layer of the business, from floor tiles to strategy slides. He didn't just understand the company, he embodied its journey. So they handed him the title, CEO. On his first day as CEO, Michael walked past the janitor's closet. He paused, opened the door, and there it was, his old mop leaning quietly in the corner. He didn't move it, didn't dust it off. He simply smiled. Because that mop wasn't a memory of struggle, it was proof of how far he'd come. As the city stretched beyond his corner office window, Michael unfolded a worn note from years ago, his mother's handwriting still clear. You can be more than they expect. He smiled. Because now he wasn't just living those words, he was proof of them, and his journey had only just begun. Michael's journey from janitor to CEO reminded us that no dream is too humble, and no beginning too small. But what if your very body was broken, and the world told you your dream was no longer possible? Let's move on to the second story, coming up next.
Story 2. The girl with one leg who danced on the world stage. Grace in the face of pain, a motivation story of resilience, had danced since she could stand. The living room was her stage, and every step was a performance. Her mother always said, "You weren't born to walk, baby. You were born to dance." And truly, when Ava danced, the world faded, and only the music remained. By the age of 8, Ava had joined a junior ballet company. Her instructors called her feet magical, light, graceful, full of promise. She dreamed of the grandest stages, the Bolshoi, the Royal Ballet. Her days were filled with rehearsals, and her nights with dreams of spotlight and applause. Then everything changed. A rainy afternoon, a flash of headlights, the sound of metal twisting. When Ava awoke in the hospital, her world was shattered. Her mother cried, her father was silent, and her leg, the one that had carried her dreams, was gone. Just like that, the music stopped. Ava lay in bed, silent. No tears, no anger, just emptiness. Her point shoes gathered dust in the corner. Visitors came with soft words. "You're strong. You'll find something new." But Ava didn't want new. She wanted dance, and no one could tell her if she'd ever move that way again. One day, a magazine changed everything. On its cover was Maria, a dancer with a prosthetic leg, captured mid-spin. Ava stared at the image for hours. Something inside her lit up. "If she can dance again," she whispered, "why not me?" And just like that, her fire returned. Rehabilitation turned into determination. Ava fell 100 times. Her new body felt unfamiliar. Her balance was gone, the pain was constant, but she kept rising. Each fall was a step, each bruise a reminder of her purpose. She wasn't rebuilding a body, she was rebuilding a dream, one move at a time. At 16, she auditioned for an adaptive dance program. The judges looked doubtful. Then the music began. Ava moved, not in spite of her prosthetic, but with it. She didn't hide her difference. She embraced it. When she danced, people saw not limitation, but brilliance. Born from pain and perseverance, the world took notice. Her performance went viral. From TEDx stages to global competitions, Ava became a symbol of resilience. She wasn't just a dancer with one leg. She was a dancer with an unshakable spirit. Each performance was a message. I'm still here, I'm still dancing, and I always will. At 18, she stepped onto the biggest stage of her life. Spotlights, silence, then music. She danced like never before. Free, fierce, flawless. The audience stood, roaring with applause. Ava didn't just return to the stage, she claimed it. The girl once told she'd never dance again now moved the world. In every interview, Ava smiles and says the same thing. I didn't lose my leg, I found my fire. Her prosthetic leg now bears 3 words, still dancing. Because Ava's story isn't about what was taken, but about what was born when everything else fell apart. Unstoppable grace. Ava's story reminded us that true grace isn't about perfection. It's about refusing to quit when everything tells you to stop. And just when you think age might be a limit, meet George, a man who proved that dreams don't retire, even at 89. Let's move on to the third story, coming up next.
Story 3. The old man who ran his first marathon at 89. Age is just a number, a motivation story of unfinished dreams. George Dawson had already lived a full life. Soldier, husband, father of 3, mechanic, a man who had tasted war and watched the sun rise in peace. At 89 years old, no one expected him to do anything new. Least of all, run a marathon. When he was 25, George watched a marathon on a tiny television. His heart raced with the runners, and he whispered to himself, "Someday, I'll do that." But then came bills, a leaking roof, a war overseas, and 3 children who called him Dad. That dream, it got buried under years of responsibility. One day, his granddaughter asked, "Grandpa, have you ever run a marathon?" He laughed. "I think I missed my window, sweetheart." But she just shrugged and said, "Why not try?" That night, George stares at a faded photo of himself in uniform. His back aches, his knees throb, but something inside stirs. George whispered, "Why not?" He started slow, a single lap, then 2. He called his training app Crawl to Marathon. YouTube stretching videos became his daily routine. Protein shakes replaced his usual toast and jam. Doctors warned him it was dangerous. "At your age, it's risky," they said. George smiled and replied, "So is living with regret." The gun fires, the crowd roars. George doesn't sprint, he paces, step by step, mile after mile, mile 10. George limps. A volunteer offers to help him quit. He shakes his head slowly. George whispered, "I've waited 64 years for this." 7 hours, 22 minutes. George crosses the finish line. not in victory, but in peace. Medal around his neck, his face soft, eyes shining. Announcer excited. Ladies and gentlemen, meet our oldest first-time marathon finisher. Visual, reporter microphone in his face. George smiles. The reporter asked, "What keeps you going?" George said, "Time can age the body, but it cannot extinguish the dream that is still alive." In the simple living room, the medal hangs next to the hand-painted painting. A note written in childish handwriting, "Never too late." George's story teaches us that no dream has an expiration date, only the courage to chase it. But what if your dream began without even a place to call home, and the world counted you out from the start? Let's move on to the fourth story, coming up next.
Story 4. The homeless boy who became a Harvard graduate. From street corners to Harvard, a motivation story of grit. At just 14, Chris Parker spent cold nights riding subway trains with only a backpack to his name. No family, no home. The world rushed by, never noticing the quiet boy whose life was beginning in silence and struggle. Winter in New York is brutal, but Chris didn't give up. While others saw failure, he saw a path forward through learning. His only escape was education, and his hunger to know more became the fire that kept him warm through every freezing night. In the classroom, Chris looked tired but stayed focused. No lunch, little sleep, yet always alert. He lived on borrowed time and borrowed books. While others avoided homework, he treated it like a lifeline, one step closer to changing the course of his story. A counselor found him asleep behind the gym, but instead of judgment, she offered kindness. Her simple question, "Are you okay?" opened a door. It was the first time in years someone looked beyond his silence and chose to care instead of walk away. With support, Chris entered a youth shelter, joined programs, and found mentors who believed in him. He studied hard, competed, and won. His passion turned into performance, and despite everything stacked against him, he proved that brilliance can rise from brokenness. Under a flickering streetlight, Chris wrote his college essay. No prep class, no fancy words, just truth. "I don't want pity, I want a shot." That sentence carried the weight of his past and the full force of his belief in tomorrow. The day the letter came, he didn't shout or cry. Harvard, full scholarship. He simply looked up, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you." The same streets that once swallowed him now witnessed his first step into a world that finally opened its doors. Chris walked through Harvard's halls with pride, not pretending to be someone else. He told his story, mentored others, and became a voice for those unheard. He wasn't just a student, he was proof that pain could turn into purpose and power. A young boy asked, "Could someone like me go to college too?" Chris stepped down from the stage, looked him in the eyes, and answered, "You don't have to be born into a future. You can build one, just like I did." Chris stood at Harvard's gate, his old backpack still with him, but now filled with books, not survival. His journey showed the world, even when life gives you nothing, faith in yourself and relentless effort can still build everything you ever dreamed. Chris proved that even when the world gives you nothing, belief and effort can still build everything. Now, meet Maria, a single mother who turned scraps into a global fashion brand. Let's move on to the fifth story, coming up next.
Story 5. The single mom who built an empire. Stitched from struggle, a motivation story of passion and perseverance. While most slept peacefully, Maria Alvarez sat hunched at her tiny kitchen table. The soft hum of her sewing machine was the only sound in the night. Her hands worked quietly, creating something out of nothing, while her toddler slept nearby. This was more than sewing, it was survival. At just 28, Maria's life crumbled. Her marriage ended, leaving her alone with 2 young children and barely enough to survive. She worked 2 jobs, exhausted and overwhelmed. Yet every night, when the world turned quiet, she stitched through her pain, guided by love, grit, and an old sewing needle. One afternoon, Maria's daughter came home in tears, ashamed of her old, torn backpack. That moment pierced Maria's heart. Instead of apologizing, she smiled, knelt beside her child and said, "We don't need new, we make beautiful." That night, Maria sewed more than a bag. She began sewing belief. Using old jeans and leftover floral cloth, Maria created a backpack stitched with care and dignity. Her daughter wore it proudly the next day. It wasn't just useful, it was beautiful. That bag wasn't bought. It was born from love, a mother's quiet rebellion against shame and scarcity. Days later, a phone call changed everything. A teacher said other parents wanted to know where the bag came from. Maria paused, stunned. "I made it," she replied. That question, "Can you make more?" was the spark that lit a fire deep inside her soul. A purpose was awakening. With just $40 borrowed, Maria bought thrifted fabric and worked until 3 a.m., crafting 5 unique bags. She posted them on Facebook. Within 2 days, they were gone. Sold out. She couldn't believe it. Her quiet hobby had become a spark of possibility, a chance to rewrite her life. Maria named her brand Restitch, a symbol of second chances. She learned logo design, customer service, and shipping by watching tutorials at night. Every dollar went back into the business. She bought a new sewing machine and hired a neighbor. Her kitchen became a headquarters. Her dreams became real. One morning, a small blog featured her story. The mom who turns trash into trend. Her inbox overflowed. Orders flooded in. She hadn't slept in days, but her spirit soared. Maria, once invisible and overwhelmed, was now a symbol of transformation, proving you don't need much to begin something great. Restitch grew beyond bags. It became a mission. Maria opened a small workshop and hired single mothers, offering them training, skills, and purpose. From recycled fabric to restored dignity, each product told a story. Her brand wasn't just fashion. It was empowerment stitched into every thread, every fold, every seam. At her first fashion expo, a visitor admired her bags and said, "These tell a story." Maria smiled, her eyes warm. "Yes," she replied, "they're about second chances." Today, her studio hums with hope, and on the wall hangs her daughter's first backpack, a silent reminder of where it all began. As she walks through her modern studio, Maria watches her team, once just like her, sewing stories into fabric. Framed on the wall is that first bag, with a tag that reads, "Beautiful things come from worn-out places." She smiles. "I wasn't broken," she says. "I was rebuilding." Maria stitched her way out of hardship, proof that purpose can grow from pain. But what if you found yourself behind bars, lost to the world, with nothing but paper and a pen? Now let's dive into the 6th story right
6.
ahead.
The prisoner who became a poet. Bars couldn't hold his voice, a motivation story of redemption. At just 22, Jamal King heard the gavel fall and knew life had changed. His mother cried, his brother held his empty hoodie. Jamal stayed silent. Caught between bad choices and a broken system, he wasn't evil, but he wasn't innocent either. Prison became his new reality. Time behind bars moved slowly, like molasses dripping in silence. Jamal kept to himself, doing push-ups, counting days, replaying mistakes. Fights broke out over chess games. Nobody showed emotion. Vulnerability was weakness. In that steel cage, survival meant silence, and regret played on a loop inside his mind. One day, a guard tossed a tattered book into his cell, Langston Hughes. Jamal opened it out of boredom, but kept reading out of wonder. The words spoke to him, bold, rhythmic, raw. They painted struggle and pride with elegance. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Jamal began writing, first about prison meals and concrete, then about pain, memories, and a broken system. Inmates asked for letters, poems, tributes. He scribbled on napkins, receipts, scraps. His verses gave shape to the silence around him. Through poetry, he found not just escape, but a voice. One poem taped to a wall caught a guard's eye. A volunteer helped him submit to a national contest. Months passed. Then a letter arrived. He had won. Steel Hearts was a winner. For the first time in years, Jamal wept, not for pain, but for purpose. Jamal became J.K. Redemption. His poems were printed in journals, students studied his work, letters poured in from strangers, admiring, thanking, connecting. Though his body remained locked in a cell, something else had broken free. He was no longer just an inmate. He was a writer. 15 years later, Jamal stepped out of prison gates a changed man. He carried wisdom in his words and scars in his heart. Now he teaches young people how to heal through writing, helping them find peace through expression. His mission: turn pain into poetry and silence into strength. Standing before a room of restless teens, Jamal shares his truth through poetry. His voice, once buried behind bars, now inspires change. He tells them, "Prison took my freedom, but poetry gave me something greater. My voice. And my voice. It changed everything." The room listens, really listens. Jamal's words traveled beyond walls, proof that transformation begins inside. But what if instead of a prison, you were born in a village with no school and became the teacher your people never had? Coming up next, the 7th story in our journey.
Story 7. The Boy Who Taught His Village to Read. The Village Teacher, a motivation story of purpose beyond self. In a forgotten village deep in the Philippines, a boy named Lito discovered a world beyond his own through a torn English dictionary. While the jungle hummed outside, he studied each word under a flickering kerosene lamp, believing that maybe, just maybe, learning could change everything. With no school to attend, Lito walked 5 miles every weekend just to listen through a classroom window. The teacher noticed him and quietly left worksheets behind. With no notebooks, he copied everything by hand. Page by page, he taught himself grammar, math, and the power of language. One morning, his little sister asked him what a word meant. He explained it gently. Then came his cousins, then the neighbors' children. Within weeks, 10 kids gathered around him. Using dirt as a blackboard, Lito, just a boy himself, became their teacher, sharing what he had painfully taught himself. Lito used sticks as pencils and banana leaves as paper. The chapel became a school. Each afternoon, children ran to him, not for games, but to learn. He taught letters, songs, stories, and more. In a village that had never known education, hope was being written into the soil. At first, some adults doubted him. "What good are books?" they asked. But then their children began reading signs, writing names, and explaining medicine labels. Slowly, skepticism turned to pride. Lito wasn't just teaching children, he was opening the eyes of an entire generation who had never dreamed. By 16, Lito taught over 40 students. When officials visited, they were stunned. No salary, no training, just passion. They asked what he needed. He didn't ask for money. He said, "A chalkboard, and maybe a roof." From that quiet wish, a real school began to rise. With help from a local NGO, a humble school was built. Books arrived. Lito got a scholarship to continue his studies, but he never stopped teaching. He became a certified educator, yet his heart remained in the village, where he knew the seeds of the future were just beginning to grow. Now in his 20s, Lito stands proudly at the front of a full classroom. The students raise their hands with joy. In the place where there was once silence, laughter and learning fill the air. He's not just a teacher, he's a symbol of belief, purpose, and transformation. When asked what inspired him, Lito smiled and said, "I didn't want to be the smartest boy in the village, I wanted to be the first, so I wouldn't be the last." A boy with a dictionary became a teacher who rewrote the destiny of his village. Lito lit the minds of a generation, proving that one candle can spark 100 more. But what if your dream was to conquer mountains, and the world told you your body wasn't capable? Up next, the inspiring 8th story awaits. 8. The Amputee Who Climbed Mount Everest. Higher Than Fear, a motivation story of grit on the world's tallest peak. In a world of snow and silence, a lone man crawls toward the heavens. Ice cracks beneath steel blades where legs once were. This is Arun Sharma. He isn't running anymore. He's climbing, not away from fear but straight through it, toward the summit of Mount Everest. As a child in India, Arun never stood still. He ran across rooftops, fields, and cricket pitches. Strong legs, stronger dreams. But it wasn't gold he chased. It was altitude. The mountain spoke to him in silence. He dreamed of climbing them all, starting with the tallest. At 24, Arun took his first real step toward Everest. He joined a mountaineering program, training with relentless focus. He climbed hills, then mountains. The goal was never fame. It was the impossible. And Everest, standing above the world, whispered, "Try." So, Arun answered, "Yes, but dreams, like mountains, can collapse." On a routine expedition, an avalanche swept through base camp. Arun survived, barely, but frostbite took both his legs. Doctors gave him the truth: amputation below the knees. The mountain hadn't defeated him. Life had. For a while, everything went dark. In the hospital, Aaron stopped speaking. His mother cried. Friends encouraged him to move on, to dream smaller. New goals, they said. But Aaron wasn't angry at them. He was angry at himself, because for one terrible moment, he believed them. A fellow patient gave him a book. On its cover, a man ran on carbon blades. Aaron turned pages, then paused at a single line. You are not less. You are different, and difference is your strength. That one sentence flipped a switch. His mountain returned. Arun began again, not with ease, but with agony. Walking on prosthetics tore his skin and pride. Blisters bled, balance failed, but every fall taught him something new. Each drop of pain carved strength deeper. This wasn't recovery, it was training for Everest. Quiet, determined, unseen. He didn't tell many. Only a few close friends knew his true goal. The rest thought he was learning to live again. But Aaron was learning to climb again. He sent sponsorship letters, faced rejection, trained in silence. They'll call me crazy, he said. Let them. Years later, Aaron stood once more at Everest Base Camp. Not on feet, but on blades. Not with fear, but with purpose. He faced the same mountain, but this time he was different, stronger, smarter, steel-willed. Everest hadn't shrunk. Aaron had grown. The climb was pure suffering. Thin air, frozen lashes, blood from prosthetics slicing skin. Sometimes he cried, sometimes he bled, but he never stopped. A Sherpa, seasoned from 100 climbs, watched in awe and whispered, I've never seen this kind of will before. On a crystal clear morning, Aaron pulled himself over the final ridge. The world spread out beneath him. Everest, 8,248 meters high. Aaron, higher in spirit. He planted a flag into the snow, 3 words, handwritten in ink, I am enough. The world was watching now. Headlines came. Interviews, applause. Aaron became a symbol for strength beyond limbs. He spoke to crowds, inspired thousands. But when asked what the summit meant, he never spoke of glory. He always said the same words. It wasn't about proving others wrong, it was about proving myself right. Today, Aaron wakes with purpose. He straps on his prosthetics, not with sadness but pride. On his wall is a photo, him on Everest, arms raised to the sky. He didn't just conquer a mountain. He conquered every doubt, every voice that ever said he couldn't. Aaron had no legs, but climbed the tallest mountain. But what if you had no legs, no food, and no roof, yet still found a way to feed thousands? Our next story is about hunger, hope, and the man who gave everything when he had nothing. Let's continue with the 9th story, just around the corner.
The Orphan Who Fed a Nation. From empty hands to full plates, a motivation story of service and strength. At 6, Kwame lost everything. His parents, his home, his safety. The war took it all. But as he planted a single seed in cracked earth, hunger in his belly, one thing remained unshaken: hope. A hope that one day he'd grow more than just food. He'd grow change. In the refugee camp, every meal was a miracle. Kwame never forgot the sound of his sister's cries, hollow, hungry. While others dreamed of leaving, Kwame dreamed of returning, not to survive, but to serve. He made a silent vow: I'll come back with food. At 12, he became a student of the soil. He helped elders garden, asked questions, and clung to a children's book on farming like treasure. He didn't just read, he absorbed. Every crop he saw fail taught him how to help one grow later. He worked, hauling water, selling fruit, fixing fences. Every coin he saved bought him knowledge. When a scholarship took him from the camp to the classroom, he didn't just study agriculture. He studied hunger, he studied healing, and he studied how to feed a broken land. At 25, Kwame returned, not as a refugee, but as a provider. The fields were dry, the people weary, but he saw potential. He launched Harvest Hope, a project that trained farmers, gave seeds, and built irrigation. He wasn't planting crops, he was planting dignity. It wasn't easy. Floods came. Equipment vanished. Doubt whispered. Some nights, Kwame slept on cold floors, wondering if the dream had withered. But every morning, he rose with the sun and the same mission. No child should feel the hunger he once did. Slowly, the earth responded. Corn rose, tomatoes bloomed, and hope returned. In 5 years, Harvest Hope touched 14 villages, trained 2,000 farmers, and fed 10,000 mouths. The boy with empty hands had become the man who filled plates and hearts. "Why food?" a journalist once asked. Kwame looked across the green fields and said softly, "Because when I had nothing, not even parents, I had hunger, and I swore that no child would feel what I felt if I could help it." He didn't just return with seeds, he returned with strength. The barefoot boy became a nation's feeder, and through every meal, every harvest, every smile, Kwame reminded the world, when you grow from pain, you can feed with purpose. Kwame didn't just plant crops, he planted dignity and hope in the hearts of thousands. But sometimes, change doesn't start with food or farming. It starts with a voice brave enough to speak, even when it shakes. And finally, the 10th and most powerful story is coming right up.
Story 10. The girl who spoke up and changed a law. She raised her voice, a motivation story of courage and change. In a small rural classroom, 14-year-old Mei Lin stood with clenched fists and a trembling voice. In a world where girls were expected to be silent, she chose to speak. What she said that day would light a fire that no one could put out. Mei watched her brother receive new books while she shared a torn one with 2 cousins. Girls in her village were taught to serve, not study, but Mei asked the question no one dared: why must girls be less? And why must we accept it? When her best friend Liane vanished from class, Mei discovered the truth. Liane was pulled out to prepare for marriage. She was only 14. That night, Mei stared at her books, her sister, and her own reflection. Something inside her broke, and something far stronger awakened. The next day, Mei walked to the front of her class. No teacher called her, no adult approved her, but she spoke anyway. Education is a right for everyone. Her words stunned the room. Some clapped, some warned her, but her fire had already been lit. Mei spent her nights writing, 50 petitions in her own hand, calling for girls' right to stay in school. She mailed them to local officials, newspapers, ministries. Weeks passed with no reply. But she didn't stop, because silence was no longer an option for her. One morning, a knock came. A journalist had received her letter. He listened, then published her story. The headline read, "Village Girl Demands Education for All." Mei's words traveled across the country, and suddenly her voice was no longer small. It was being heard. Activists reached out. Celebrities shared her story. Mei was invited to speak in Beijing. Her speech, raw and brave, spread like wildfire, viewed millions of times. What began as one trembling voice became a national movement for change. Her courage had become a call to action. The government listened. Policies were changed. Schools tracked girls' attendance. Families received support for educating daughters. Awareness campaigns swept the countryside. Change didn't come easily, but it came. And it all started with a girl who dared to ask, "Why not me? Why not us?" Now grown, Mei travels the world as a human rights advocate. She speaks for girls still silenced by culture and fear. When asked how she found her voice, she smiles and says, "I was scared to speak, but more scared of staying quiet and watching nothing change." In a modern classroom filled with girls in uniforms, a photo hangs on the wall. It's young Mei speaking at her old village school. Beneath it are the words, "One voice can start a movement." And because she spoke, thousands now have the power to learn. 10 stories, 10 voices, 10 people who didn't wait for perfect conditions. They faced fear and acted anyway. They weren't heroes, just human, like you. And if they could rise from doubt and change the world, maybe today is your turn to rise and begin your own story. If these stories moved you, share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their story isn't over. Leave a comment below. Which story hit you the hardest and why? Don't forget to like this video if it inspired you, subscribe for more true motivational stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another spark of courage. Because we can change a life, and maybe that life is yours.